The email landed in my inbox at precisely 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. 3 minutes later, my coffee mug shattered against the kitchen wall, dark liquid streaming down the eggshell paint like tears. 6 years of loyalty, 3 promotions, and countless late nights, all reduced to 5 little words: return to office or resign. I stared at my laptop screen, watching the words blur through angry tears. The cursor blinked back at me, patient and unfeeling, much like our CEO, Richard Blackwood. What he didn't realize was that when you corner someone with nothing left to lose, you create something far more dangerous than an employee who might quit. You create someone with a purpose. My name is Vanessa Morgan, and this is the story of how I buried a company. Not with a coffin, though I did bring one, but with something far more lethal: the truth. I should probably start at the beginning. 6 years ago, I joined Helix Dynamics as a junior marketing analyst. Fresh out of college with a business degree and enough student loans to make my stomach churn every time I checked my bank account. Helix wasn't my dream job. To be honest, I wasn't entirely sure what they even did when I applied. Something about revolutionary enterprise solutions and disruptive technology integration. Corporate buzzword bingo at its finest. But the pay was decent. The benefits package included health insurance that actually covered things. And the office was only a 20-minute commute from my shoebox apartment. In the job market of the time, that practically made it a unicorn opportunity. What Helix Dynamics actually did, as I would come to learn, was develop proprietary software that helped large corporations analyze consumer data to predict buying patterns. Not exactly saving the world, but not actively destroying it either, which seemed like a reasonable ethical compromise for someone trying to pay off $60,000 in student debt. The first few years were unremarkable. I did my job, exceeded expectations when possible, and climbed the corporate ladder with careful determination. Office politics existed, of course, but I navigated them with relative ease. Keep your head down, your performance metrics up, and don't get caught in the crossfire when department heads went to war over budget allocations. By year 3, I had been promoted to senior marketing strategist. By year 5, I was the marketing director with a team of 12 under my supervision. I had a corner office with a view of the city skyline, a salary that had finally put a dent in my student loans, and the quiet respect of my colleagues. Then came the pandemic. Like most companies, Helix sent everyone home with their laptops and second monitors, assuming we'd be back in a few weeks. Weeks turned to months. Months turned to years. And something unexpected happened. We thrived. Our productivity didn't drop. It soared. With no commute and flexible hours, my team delivered campaigns that increased our market share by 17% in the first year of remote work. The second year, we broke company records for client acquisition. Turns out people work better when they can take a walk when they hit a creative block, or throw in a load of laundry between meetings instead of pretending to look busy at their desks. For me personally, remote work was revolutionary. The constant low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for years faded. The Sunday night dread disappeared. I slept better, ate better, and found time for hobbies that had been gathering dust since college. I started painting again, took up hiking, adopted a rescue dog named Edison who became my constant companion. I even found love, ironically at a time when I wasn't going anywhere. James lived in my apartment building, 2 floors down. We met in the elevator while both wearing masks, carrying our respective grocery hauls. His mask had dinosaurs on it, mine had flowers. We made small talk about the impossible quest for paper towels and hand sanitizer. 2 days later, I found a note slipped under my door with his number and a drawing of a dinosaur among flowers. The rest, as they say, is history. 2 years into remote work, James proposed. We bought a small house together an hour outside the city, with a yard for Edison and a spare room that I converted into a home office. The commute would have been impossible if I'd needed to go into the office every day. But as a fully remote employee, location didn't matter. Life was good. Better than good, it was balanced in a way I'd never experienced before. Which brings me back to that Tuesday morning email. From Richard Blackwood R. Blackwood, Helix Dynamics. To all staff, Helix Dynamics. Subject. Return to office policy. Effective immediately, team. Effective immediately. All Helix Dynamics employees are required to return to in-office work 5 days per week. Our company culture and innovation depend on face-to-face collaboration. The remote work experiment has run its course. Those unable or unwilling to comply with this policy by next Monday will be considered to have voluntarily resigned from their positions. No exceptions. Richard Blackwood, CEO. Helix Dynamics. I read it 3 times before the rage set in. No discussion, no transition period, no acknowledgement of the success we'd had while working remotely. Just a dictatorial edict delivered without warning. My phone started buzzing immediately. First with texts from my team members, then calls from fellow department heads. Everyone was in shock, anger, or panic. Parents who had adjusted childcare arrangements, people who had moved further from the office, team members with health concerns or immunocompromised family members, all suddenly facing an impossible choice. I tried calling my direct supervisor, Diane, the VP of marketing. Her assistant said she was in meetings all day. I emailed her, no response. I messaged her on our internal communication platform. Nothing. That's when I knew. This wasn't a decision open for discussion or appeal. This was Blackwood flexing his power, reminding us all who was in charge. I spent the day fielding calls from my panicking team, trying to provide reassurance I didn't feel. By evening, I had a migraine that made my vision blur and my stomach churn. James found me in our home office, staring blankly at my laptop. "Bad day?" he asked, setting a cup of tea next to me. "You could say that," I said, showing him the email. He read it, his expression darkening. Can they even do this? Just change everything overnight? Apparently. What about your team? Emily just had a baby. And doesn't Miguel take care of his father? I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility for my team members crushing me. Everyone's freaking out, rightfully so. "What are you going to do?" James asked, perching on the edge of my desk. That was the question, wasn't it? The house we'd bought was too far for a daily commute. I'd have to get up at 4:30 a.m. to make it to the office by 8 geese, and that's if traffic cooperated. We'd have to find someone to take care of Edison during the day. James would barely see me. The life we'd built together would be unsustainable. "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't quit. We just bought this house, but I can't commute 2 hours each way every day either." James was quiet for a moment. "We could sell the house, move back closer to the city." The thought made my stomach sink. We'd spent months finding this place, making it ours. The garden I'd planted, the studio space for James's photography. The neighborhood where we'd finally started to feel at home. "Maybe I can negotiate. Ask for a hybrid schedule," I said, though I already knew it was futile. The email had been clear, no exceptions. "You've given that company everything. Ness, you've earned the right to ask." I nodded, but inside, a different thought was taking shape. Not about negotiating or compromising, but about fighting back. After all, I wasn't just any employee. I was the marketing director who had orchestrated the company's most successful campaigns. I had access to data, insights, and internal communications that told a very different story than the one Blackwood was selling about company culture and innovation. "I need to think," I said, squeezing James's hand. "I'll be up in a bit." After he left, I opened my laptop and began to dig. If I was going to fight, I needed ammunition. The next day, I went into the office, not because I was complying with Blackwood's edict, but because I needed to see the landscape for myself. The office was mostly empty. People had until Monday to return, after all. But a few eager middle managers and anxious junior staff had already resumed their desk jockeying. The place felt like a ghost town. Plants had died during the prolonged absence. The once bustling break room was eerily quiet. Half the lights were off to save electricity. It felt like walking through a time capsule from another era. I badged into my corner office, which had apparently been untouched since I'd last been there. A layer of dust covered everything. A forgotten coffee mug had developed its own ecosystem. The whiteboard still displayed marketing goals from 3 years ago. I spent the day ostensibly setting up my office for my return, but actually gathering intelligence. I scheduled meetings with key people, chatted casually with the few colleagues present, and accessed files that were only available on the internal server. By late afternoon, a picture was emerging, and it was uglier than I had imagined. Helix Dynamics was in trouble. Big trouble. The pandemic had boosted our business initially, companies desperate for consumer insights as buying patterns changed overnight, but the last year had seen a sharp decline. 3 major clients had jumped ship. The much-hyped new software platform was months behind schedule and millions over budget. Investors were getting nervous. And Richard Blackwood, our illustrious CEO, was looking for a scapegoat. Remote work was the perfect target. Blame the declining numbers on lack of innovation due to remote work. Force everyone back to the office to show investors he was taking decisive action. And if people quit rather than return, well, that would save on severance packages when the inevitable layoffs came. I found evidence of all this in quarterly reports, board meeting minutes, and email exchanges that I probably shouldn't have had access to, but did thanks to an IT department that had never quite gotten around to updating permission settings after my last promotion. The most damning document was a presentation Blackwood had given to the board just 2 weeks ago. One slide in particular made my blood boil. Strategy to address declining performance. Immediate return to office for all staff. Estimated 25-30% voluntary attrition. Additional 15% workforce reduction in Q3. Primarily target higher salary. Senior positions. Restructure remaining teams under new leadership. They weren't just forcing us back to punish us. They were hoping we'd quit so they wouldn't have to pay severance. And for those who did return, layoffs were coming anyway. I copied everything I could onto an encrypted drive and headed home, my mind racing with possibilities. James was waiting when I got back, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "You're planning something," he said as I walked through the door. It wasn't a question. "They're setting us up," I replied, dropping my bag and kneeling to greet Edison, who was wiggling with excitement at my return. Blackwood's using this return-to-office mandate to force resignations before the layoffs hit. "Christ," James muttered. "Can they get away with that?" "They're certainly trying." I stood up, suddenly feeling the weight of the day. "I need a drink before I tell you the rest." 2 glasses of wine later, I'd laid out everything I'd discovered and the beginnings of a plan that was forming in my mind. James listened without interrupting, his photographer's eye taking in every detail. "It's risky," he said finally. "You could lose everything." "I'm going to lose everything anyway," I pointed out. "At least this way, I go down fighting. What can I do to help?" And that, right there, is why I love this man. Not, "Are you sure about this?" Or, "Maybe you should just find another job." Just an immediate offer of support. "I'm going to need your help with the visuals," I said. "And possibly a coffin." He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. "Literal or metaphorical?" "Both," I said, a smile spreading across my face for the first time since that email had arrived. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I reached out to trusted members of my team and other department heads who I knew would be devastated by the return mandate. I didn't tell them everything. Plausible deniability was important. But I gauged their frustration and collected their stories. Emily from my team had just finished her maternity leave and had arranged her life around remote work with her newborn. Miguel was the primary caretaker for his father with Parkinson's. Aisha had finally been able to manage her chronic illness while working from home, without the exhaustion of commuting and office environments triggering flares. Every story made me more determined. I also did my homework on the legal front, consulting discreetly with an employment attorney about whistleblower protections and constructive dismissal. I had to be careful. I didn't want to give Helix grounds to sue me into oblivion. By Sunday night, everything was in place. I hadn't slept well in days. but adrenaline was keeping me going. "You're sure about this?" James asked as we loaded the car. "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." He kissed me, long and hard. "That's my girl." Monday morning arrived with appropriate dramatic flair. Thunderstorms that turned the commute into a nightmare for those returning to the office. I arrived early, having left home at an ungodly hour to beat the worst of the traffic. The office was buzzing with reluctant returnees. People setting up workstations that had been untouched for years. Awkward hellos and forced enthusiasm. The collective misery was palpable. At 8:30, Richard Blackwood strode in, flanked by his executive team. He looked exactly as I remembered, tall, silver-haired, with the practiced confidence of a man who had never faced serious consequences for his actions. His custom suit probably cost more than most of his employees made in a month. He headed straight for the large conference room where an all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. No doubt to welcome us back and extol the virtues of in-person collaboration while conveniently not mentioning the layoffs looming on the horizon. I watched from my office, waiting for my moment. At 8:45, I sent a company-wide email. From Vanessa Morgan, v. Morgan Helix Dynamics, com, to all staff, Helix Dynamics, com. Subject, important pre-meeting information, colleagues. Before today's all-hands meeting, I've prepared some crucial context about our return to office and the company's current situation. Please review the attached presentation. I'll be addressing these points directly in the meeting as well. Vanessa Morgan, Director of Marketing. The attachment was a carefully crafted presentation with all the evidence I'd gathered, laid out in clear, undeniable terms. The financial troubles, the planned layoffs, the cynical strategy to force resignations, all of it backed up with internal documents and data. I knew I had about 5 minutes before all hell broke loose. I used them wisely. I walked to the conference room, pulling behind me a small hand truck on which sat a child-sized coffin. Not a real one. Of course. James had constructed it from wood and painted it black with the Helix Dynamics logo emblazoned on the side in the company's signature blue. As I entered the already crowded conference room, conversations stopped. All eyes turned to me and my macabre prop. Richard Blackwood, who had been chatting with the CFO, froze mid-sentence. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his practiced corporate smile faltering. "This," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is a visual representation of what you're doing to this company." His face darkened. "Vanessa, if this is some kind of protest against the return to office policy, it's not about the policy." I cut him off. "It's about the lie behind it." Murmurs spread through the room. People were checking their phones, opening the email I'd sent. Expressions changing from confusion to shock to anger. "I don't know what you think you're doing," Blackwood said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "But this meeting is canceled. Everyone back to your desks." Nobody moved. "You told us we needed to return to the office for the sake of company culture and innovation," I said, projecting my voice the way I did during marketing presentations. "What you didn't tell us is that you're hoping 25 to 30% of us will quit rather than return, saving you the trouble of laying us off." The room erupted in angry exclamations. Blackwood's face went from red to purple. "That's a baseless accusation," he sputtered. "Is it?" I gestured to the screens around the room, where people had pulled up my presentation. "Because your own presentation to the board says otherwise." He looked around wildly, suddenly realizing he'd lost control of the room. The executive team shifted uncomfortably, none of them meeting the eyes of their subordinates. "This is proprietary company information," Blackwood said, grasping for authority. "Accessing and distributing it is grounds for immediate termination." "I'm aware," I replied calmly. "Consider this my exit interview." I turned to address the room. For those who haven't opened the attachment yet, let me summarize. Helix is in financial trouble. The return to office mandate isn't about collaboration, it's about forcing resignations before the planned layoffs next quarter. Those layoffs will target senior positions first, people with higher salaries and benefits. They're counting on our compliance or resignation either way. The room was deadly silent now, all eyes on me. I've given 6 years to this company, I continued. I've led campaigns that increased our market share when everyone else in the industry was struggling. My team has broken every record on the books while working remotely. And this, I tapped the coffin beside me, is the thanks we get. A cynical attempt to trick us into quitting so the company doesn't have to pay severance. That's enough, Blackwood roared. Security, remove her immediately. 2 security guards hesitated at the door, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Before I go, I said quickly, you should know that copies of all these documents have been sent to the business desks at every major news outlet in the country. I've also filed a formal whistleblower complaint with the Department of Labor regarding the attempt to circumvent proper layoff procedures and notifications. Blackwood's face went from purple to ashen. The CFO whispered something urgently in his ear. One more thing, I added, reaching into the coffin and pulling out a stack of envelopes. These are for my team members, letters of recommendation highlighting their exceptional work and achievements. I've also reached out to contacts at several companies who are still embracing remote work and who would be thrilled to hire proven performers. I handed the letters to my stunned team members, who were clustered together near the front of the room. You can't do this, Blackwood said, but his voice had lost its edge. I already have, I replied, turning to walk out. Oh, and the coffin is a gift. For the company culture you're killing. I made it to the elevator before security caught up with me. They escorted me out of the building, but with a gentleness that spoke volumes. One of them even whispered, "Good luck," as they handed me my bag at the door. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds as I walked to my car, shaking with a mixture of adrenaline and terror. What had I just done? Had I gone too far? Would Helix sue me into bankruptcy? My phone buzzed with a text from James. How did it go? Before I could respond, another message came through, this one from Emily on my team. The whole place is in chaos. Blackwood stormed out. HR is in panic mode. What do we do now? Then another. From Miguel. Thank you. My father thanks you too. And another, from Aisha. You're a legend. Also, I already have an interview with one of those contacts you mentioned. Texts kept coming from team members and colleagues across departments. Some were frightened about what would happen next. Others were exhilarated. All of them were supportive. I leaned against my car, suddenly exhausted but strangely light. Whatever came next, legal battles, career repercussions, financial strain, I had done what I believed was right. I had exposed the truth. I had stood up for my team and for all the employees who deserved better. I finally texted James back. It's done. Coming home now. His response was immediate. Proud of you. Edison and I are waiting. I drove home in a daze, my mind already racing with next steps. I would need to update my resume. Of course, reach out to my own professional network. Prepare for possible legal consequences of my actions. But for the moment, all I wanted was to hug my dog, kiss my fiancé, and maybe take a nap in the home we had fought so hard to keep. The aftermath was both better and worse than I expected. By the time I got home, the story had already broken on social media. Someone in the meeting had recorded my confrontation with Blackwood and posted it online. It was spreading like wildfire, with the hashtag Coffin Girl trending within hours. The next day, business news outlets picked up the story. Marketing director brings Coffin to protest. Return to office mandate was the headline on One. Whistleblower exposes corporate scheme to force resignations was another. Helix Dynamics issued a terse statement claiming I had misrepresented confidential business information and was under investigation for corporate espionage. They threatened legal action for breach of confidentiality and defamation. But the damage was done. Investors started asking uncomfortable questions. Clients began reconsidering their relationships with the company. And employees, not just at Helix, but at companies across the country, facing similar return-to-office mandates, were talking. 3 days after my dramatic exit, I received a cease and desist letter from Helix's attorneys. The same day, I got calls from 5 different news programs wanting interviews and 2 competing companies offering me positions. A week later, Helix announced that Richard Blackwood was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. The company also revealed they were reconsidering their workplace flexibility policies in light of employee feedback. 2 weeks after that, they quietly rescinded the return-to-office mandate, offering a hybrid model instead. Too little, too late for many, including most of my team, who had already accepted positions elsewhere thanks to my connections and recommendations. As for me, I had multiple job offers to consider, including one from a progressive tech company that had built their entire business model around remote work. They wanted me to head up a new marketing division focused on work-life balance solutions. The legal threats from Helix eventually fizzled out. They couldn't pursue action without drawing even more attention to their attempted end run around proper layoff procedures. The whistleblower complaint I'd filed provided some protection, and the court of public opinion had already ruled decisively in my favor. James and I kept our house, Edison kept his yard, and I kept my dignity, along with something I hadn't expected, a platform. Suddenly, I was being invited to speak at conferences about workplace culture and employee advocacy. I wrote articles about the future of work and the power dynamics in corporate America. I consulted with companies looking to implement genuine flexibility rather than performative policies. 6 months after my Coffin protest, I published a book titled Bringing the Coffin: How to Fight for Workplace Dignity in the Modern Era. It became a bestseller in the business category and led to a speaking tour that paid more than my Helix salary ever had. A year later, Helix Dynamics was acquired by a larger tech firm in what industry insiders recognized as a fire sale. Richard Blackwood, from what I heard, had trouble finding another CEO position and eventually started a workplace culture consultancy that gained little traction. As for the coffin that started it all, it sits in my home office now. A reminder of the day I chose truth over compliance, justice over security, and found that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is to be radically, unapologetically human. Looking back now, I realize that what seemed like the end of my career was actually the beginning of something far more meaningful. By standing up not just for myself but for all the employees who couldn't risk doing so, I found a purpose beyond marketing strategies and quarterly targets. The truth is, companies need employees far more than employees need any specific company. The pandemic proved that work can happen anywhere, that productivity isn't tied to presenteeism, that trust and flexibility yield better results than surveillance and rigid control. Some might say my methods were extreme, that bringing a coffin to an all-hands meeting crossed a line of professionalism. Perhaps it did. But when those in power refuse to hear reasonable arguments, sometimes a visual aid becomes necessary. I'm not suggesting everyone should bring coffins to their offices, but I'm suggesting that the era of silent compliance with dehumanizing corporate policies needs to end. That we all have more power than we realize when we stand together. That sometimes, the greatest act of professionalism is refusing to participate in a broken system. James and I got married 6 months after the Helix incident, in a small ceremony in our backyard. My former team members were all there, along with new colleagues and friends I'd made through my advocacy work. Edison served as the ring bearer, carrying a small pillow attached to his collar with the rings tied securely to it. During the reception, Emily approached me, her baby daughter balanced on her hip. "I never properly thanked you," she said, watching as her daughter reached for my necklace with curious fingers. "For what?" I asked, letting the baby grasp my finger instead. "For everything. The recommendation letters, the contacts, standing up to Blackwood." She paused. "I was going to quit. I couldn't figure out how to make the office return work with childcare, but I needed the income. I was losing sleep trying to find a solution." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "Any decent person would have done the same." She shook her head. "But they didn't." "You did." Later that night, after the guests had gone and James and I were cleaning up the last of the celebration, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Happy?" he asked, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Very," I replied, leaning back against him. Though I'm not sure I deserved all those toasts about courage and integrity, I was just angry and stubborn. He laughed. Sometimes that's all courage is. Being angry enough at the right things to take a stand. Perhaps he's right. Perhaps courage isn't some lofty, noble quality reserved for heroes in epic tales. Perhaps it's just the accumulated small decisions to do what's right, even when it's difficult. To speak truth, even when silence would be safer. To bring a coffin to a meeting when words alone won't suffice. I don't know if my story will inspire others to take similar stands. I don't know if the working world will truly change, or if we'll slide back into old patterns of control and compliance. But I do know this. For every Richard Blackwood trying to drag us backward, there are thousands of workers who have tasted freedom and flexibility and won't easily surrender it. And some of us are willing to bring coffins if that's what it takes. 2 years after the infamous Coffin incident, I received an email that made me laugh out loud in my home office, startling Edison from his nap under my desk. From Diana Chen, D. Nexus, Emerge, Com. Subject, An Unexpected Inheritance, Dear Miss Morgan. I'm reaching out in my capacity as General Counsel for Nexus Emerge, the company that acquired Helix Dynamics last year. During our final clear-out of the old Helix headquarters, we discovered a certain wooden coffin with the former company logo. Our records indicate this item technically belongs to you, as you brought it onto the premises and Helix never formally claimed ownership. Would you like us to ship it to you, or should we dispose of it? On a personal note, I've read your book and appreciated your insights on workplace dignity. Nexus Emerge has implemented a fully flexible work policy with no mandatory office attendance, partly influenced by the cautionary tale of your former employer. Regards, Diana Chen, General Counsel. Nexus, Emerge. I forwarded the email to James, who called me minutes later, laughing. What are you going to do with a second coffin? He asked. I'm thinking of starting a collection, I joked. One for every toxic workplace policy. We're going to need a bigger house. I declined Diana's offer to ship the coffin, suggesting they donate it to a local theater company for use as a prop. But her email reminded me of something important. Change happens, often in unexpected ways, sometimes long after we've moved on. The coffin I brought to that meeting 3 years ago didn't just symbolize the death of company culture at Helix. It represented the beginning of the end for a certain type of corporate thinking, the idea that employees are resources to be controlled, rather than humans to be respected. My new role as a workplace advocate has taken me to companies across the country. I've consulted with executive teams trying to navigate the new landscape of work. I've spoken to employees fighting for their right to flexibility. I've even testified before a congressional committee examining labor laws for the digital age. What I've found is that the most successful companies aren't the ones clinging to outdated notions of office culture or obsessing over whether employees are at their desks from 9 to 5. They're the ones building cultures of trust, measuring results rather than hours, and recognizing that humans do their best work when they're treated like humans. Some days, I still can't believe how much my life has changed since that fateful email landed in my inbox. From marketing director to workplace revolutionary wasn't exactly the career path I had planned, but it's the one that found me when I needed it most. James's photography business has thrived in the years since, his focus shifting to documenting the changing nature of work in America. He's working on a photo essay series called The Empty Offices, capturing abandoned corporate headquarters and repurposed workspaces across the country. Edison is getting older now, gray around the muzzle, but still follows me devotedly from room to room in our house as I work. We've added a second dog to our family, a young rescue named Tesla, who brings chaotic energy to balance Edison's dignified senior presence. Last month, I received word that Richard Blackwood's workplace consultancy had filed for bankruptcy. I felt no joy at the news, only a quiet satisfaction that the business world had moved on from his outdated philosophies. Some coffins are meant to stay buried. As for me, I found peace in this unexpected second career. I still use my marketing skills, but now in service of a cause I believe in deeply, the dignity of workers in a changing world. My next book, scheduled for publication next year, explores how the pandemic permanently altered our relationship with work and offers a roadmap for building more humane workplaces. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd simply resigned when that email arrived. As Blackwood hoped I would. If I'd quietly packed up my desk, surrendered the life James and I had built, and slunk away without a fight, I would have found another job. Certainly, life would have gone on, but something essential would have been lost. Not just for me, but for all the employees at Helix and beyond who found their voice because someone was willing to bring a coffin to a meeting. There's a lesson in that, I think. Not that dramatic gestures are always the answer, but that injustice thrives in silence. That speaking truth to power sometimes requires visual aids. That one person willing to risk everything can create space for others to stand up to. If there's one thing I hope people take from my story, it's this. Your labor has value. Your time has value. Your health and well-being have value. And any employer who forgets that fundamental truth deserves to find a coffin in their conference room. The pandemic didn't create the problems in our workplaces. It just exposed them. The arbitrary control, the distrust, the presenteeism masquerading as productivity, the disconnect between executive decisions and frontline realities. Now, as we rebuild and reimagine work for a new era, we have a choice. We can resurrect the corpse of outdated management philosophies, or we can create something better, more humane, more sustainable. I know which side I'm on. And I've got a coffin ready for anyone who tries to drag us backward. 3 years after bringing a coffin to an all-hands meeting, I returned to the former Helix Dynamics headquarters. The building had been sold after the acquisition, converted into a mixed-use space with apartments on the upper floors and flexible co-working spaces below. I had been invited to give a talk on workplace transformation as part of the grand opening. Standing in what had once been the main conference room, the very space where I'd confronted Blackwood, I felt a strange sense of closure. Where rows of identical desks had once stood, there were now collaborative spaces with comfortable seating, private phone booths, and adjustable workstations. The windows that had been perpetually shaded were now open, flooding the space with natural light. Plants thrived in the corners. A cafe occupied what had once been Executive Row. "What do you think?" asked the property developer who had shown me around. "It's unrecognizable," I said, in the best possible way. "We used your book as inspiration, she said. "The chapter about designing workplaces for humans rather than corporate robots." I laughed. "I'm flattered. Though I'm not an architect or designer." "No, but you understand what makes people want to come to a space versus what makes them dread it. That's more valuable than any design degree." After my talk, a young woman approached me, clutching a dog-eared copy of my book. "I started my career at Helix," she said. "I was an intern when you brought the coffin. I was in that meeting." "Oh." I felt a rush of memories. "That must have been quite a first impression of corporate life," she laughed. "It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I thought I was witnessing the end of my career before it even started." "I'm sorry about that," I said. "It wasn't my intention to frighten interns." "Don't apologize," she said quickly. "It was the most important lesson I could have received. You showed me that it's possible to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary. That sometimes one person can make a difference." She paused. "I run my own startup now. We're small, but growing. And we're fully remote by design." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely moved. "What's your company do?" "We develop accessibility software for remote workers with disabilities. It started because of Miguel from your team. He hired me after Helix imploded. Working with him and his father showed me how many barriers still exist for disabled people in the workplace." I felt a lump in my throat. Miguel always said his father was his greatest teacher. "He was mine too," she said. "Anyway, I just wanted to thank you. For the coffin. For everything that came after." As I left the building that had once represented everything wrong with corporate culture, I felt a sense of wonder at how life unfolds. The worst day of my career had led to the most meaningful work of my life. A desperate act of defiance had sparked changes I could never have anticipated. The company I had helped bury had been reborn as something better. The career I thought I was sacrificing had transformed into a more fulfilling path. The colleagues I'd fought for had gone on to create their own positive changes in the world. James was waiting for me in the car outside, camera in hand. He'd been documenting the transformation of the building for his ongoing project. "How was it?" he asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Weird to be back?" "Actually, it felt right," I said. "Like visiting the grave of someone who lived a complicated life but ultimately found peace." He laughed. "Only you would describe a corporate headquarters as having a soul." "Not the building," I clarified. "The idea it represented, the notion that work is something done to employees rather than by them. The concept of office as control mechanism rather than collaborative tool. And that idea is dead?" "Not entirely," I admitted. "There are still plenty of Richard Blackwoods out there, trying to force people back into boxes. But they're fighting a losing battle." As we drove home, I thought about all the people who had reached out to me over the years with their own stories of workplace rebellion. The engineer who had organized a company-wide walkout when their CEO tried to ban remote work. The teacher who had fought for hybrid learning options to continue for students with health issues. The nurse who had used my Coffin story as inspiration for a powerful protest against unsafe staffing levels. Each of them had found their own way to speak truth to power. Each had brought their own metaphorical coffin to the meeting. And each had created ripples of change that extended far beyond their immediate situation. That night, as James and I sat on our back porch watching Edison and Tesla chase fireflies in the yard, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the home we'd fought to keep, for the work that now filled our days with purpose rather than dread, for the unexpected journey that had led us here. "You know," James said, breaking our comfortable silence, "in all the interviews you've done, all the talks you've given, you've never actually explained why a coffin." I smiled. "Dramatic effect, mostly." "Just mostly." I took a sip of wine, considering. When Blackwood sent that email, it felt like he was killing something precious. Not just our remote work arrangement, but the trust that had developed, the balance we'd found, the humanity of it all. I wanted him to see, viscerally, what he was destroying. Mission accomplished, I'd say. Besides, I added with a grin, can you imagine if I'd just brought a strongly worded letter? No one would remember that 3 years later. He laughed. True. No one would be asking me about that woman who brought a memo to a meeting. As the fireflies blinked around us and our dogs played in the twilight, I thought about all the ways work had changed since that fateful day. About how many companies had embraced flexibility as a competitive advantage rather than a pandemic necessity. About how many employees had found their voices, demanding to be treated as humans rather than resources. The revolution wasn't complete. Of course, change never is. There would always be leaders who clung to outdated notions of control. Always be workplaces that valued presence over performance. But something fundamental had shifted in our collective understanding of what work could be, should be. And if I had played some small part in that shift, well, that was worth every risk I'd taken, every bridge I'd burned. The coffin I'd brought to that meeting wasn't just a protest against one CEO's edict. It was a declaration that some things should be allowed to die. Micromanagement, distrust, dehumanization. The false equivalence of physical presence and productivity. In their place, something new could grow. Something more sustainable, more humane, more aligned with the complex realities of modern life. 5 years after the coffin incident, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. The American Business Association, the same organization that had given Richard Blackwood their CEO of the Year award a decade earlier, wanted me to keynote their annual conference on the future of work. The email noted that my unique perspective and dramatic approach to workplace advocacy would offer valuable insights to their members, who were struggling to adapt to changing employee expectations. I showed it to James, who snorted. Translation: help us understand why our employees keep quitting when we demand they return to our expensive office buildings. Should I accept? I asked. Depends, he said. Are you allowed to bring a coffin to this one too? I did accept, and I did bring a coffin, a miniature one this time, small enough to sit on the podium beside me as I spoke. It served as a powerful visual reminder of what happens when leaders prioritize control over trust, tradition over innovation, buildings over people. My speech wasn't angry or accusatory. I didn't need to be the firebrand I once was. Instead, I spoke about the opportunity before us, the chance to reimagine work for a new era, to build organizations that thrive because their people thrive. I talked about companies that had embraced true flexibility and seen their productivity and retention soar, about leaders who had learned to measure outcomes rather than hours, about offices redesigned as gathering places rather than daily requirements. The question isn't whether we should return to the old ways or embrace the new. I told the audience of executives and business leaders, the question is what kind of future we want to create together. One where work is a place you go, or one where work is something you do, with purpose, with passion, and with the full spectrum of your humanity engaged. I gestured to the miniature coffin. This represents a choice. We can bury the dehumanizing aspects of work that never served us well, or we can cling to them until they bury us instead. The response was mixed, as I'd expected. Some executives approached me afterward with genuine curiosity and openness to change. Others avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with my message. A few muttered about entitled millennials and the real world as they passed. But change doesn't require universal agreement. It only requires enough people willing to imagine and fight for something better. As I packed up my presentation materials, a woman in her 60s approached me, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Morgan," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Eleanor Blackwood." I froze, the name registering immediately. "As in, Richard's wife, yes," she confirmed. "Ex-wife now, actually." I'm not sure what to say, I admitted, shaking her hand automatically. "I'm sorry about—" "Don't apologize," she interrupted. "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" I echoed, confused. She nodded, a small smile forming. "Richard was always difficult, controlling, at home and at work. What you did, it was the first time in his career that anyone had truly challenged him. It changed him. For better or worse, I couldn't help asking. Both, at first. The humiliation was hard for him, but eventually, healthier. He's teaching business ethics at a community college now, if you can believe it." I couldn't. Quite. But I nodded politely. "Anyway," she continued, "your coffin stunt gave me the courage to finally leave a marriage that had died years before. So thank you for that unintended consequence." As she walked away, I marveled at the strange, interconnected ways our actions ripple outward, affecting lives we never intended to touch. That night, I called Miguel, who had gone on to start his own accessibility consultancy after Helix. His father had passed away the previous year, but the work they had done together, developing adaptive technologies for people with Parkinson's, was continuing to help thousands. "You'll never guess who I met today," I told him, recounting my encounter with Eleanor Blackwood. He laughed. "The world gets smaller every day. Speaking of which, did Emily tell you about her new project?" Emily, my former team member with the newborn, had gone on to create a platform connecting parents with flexible work opportunities. It had recently secured major funding to expand nationwide. She mentioned they were close to a breakthrough. I said, "I didn't realize it had happened already." "Announced yesterday," Miguel confirmed. "She wanted to tell you herself, but you were busy terrifying business executives with coffins." We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on the lives of other former team members. Aisha was now a VP at a healthcare tech company. Jordan had written a best-selling novel. Sanjay had returned to India to care for his parents and started a successful remote work consultancy there. Each of them had found their way forward after Helix. Each had created something meaningful from the ashes of what we'd left behind. After we hung up, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset and reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here, the career I had carefully built and then dramatically destroyed. the new path that had opened before me, unexpected and fulfilling in ways I could never have planned. 6 years ago, an email had landed in my inbox. 5 words that changed everything. Return to office or resign. I had chosen a third option, not return, not resign, but rebel. Bring a coffin to the meeting. Tell the truth. Stand my ground. It had cost me a job but given me a purpose. It had closed one door but opened countless others. It had ended one chapter of my life but begun a far more interesting one. As I watched the fading light paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about all the people still fighting their own battles in workplaces across the world, the ones facing impossible demands from leaders who saw them as resources rather than humans, the ones struggling to balance work and life, to protect their health and sanity in systems designed to extract maximum value with minimum regard for human cost. I couldn't fight all their battles for them, but I could keep telling my story. Keep reminding them that sometimes, the most powerful act of resistance is simply refusing to accept the unacceptable. Keep showing them that one person with a coffin and the courage to use it can change more than they might imagine. The sun dipped below the horizon, and I went inside to find James and our dogs waiting for me. This home, this life we'd fought for, it had been worth every risk, every moment of terror and uncertainty. And if someone asked me tomorrow if I would do it all again, bring a coffin to a meeting, risk my career, start a workplace revolution, my answer would be simple, in a heartbeat, with no regrets. And maybe a slightly bigger coffin. Because some things deserve a proper burial. And some things, like human dignity, work-life balance, and the courage to stand up for what's right, deserve to live on. No matter how many CEOs try to kill them with 5 little words in an email.